Hey, I'm Jeff Lasky from 10 News. So, I did a fun story this week tracing David Letterman's performing history here in San Diego. And we had so many great stories and so much really interesting information about Letterman and San Diego's comedy history. We just didn't have nearly enough room to put it all in the story. So, we thought we'd kind of put something together for 10news.com. So, I talked with a comedian named Argus Hamilton, who's been around for a long time, and he was actually on the bill. He was on the same show with David Letterman the night that they opened up the very first comedy club in San Diego, the Comedy Store in Pacific Beach, and then a year later when they opened the Comedy Store in La Jolla, which is still open to this day. So Argus had some tremendous stories about Dave, but also kind of teaching us about the history of these first comedy clubs and just how important the comedy club in La Jolla was to really beginning the stand-up comedy boom across the country, but also how important San Diego's audiences were to launching David Letterman's career. So we put it together. It's about 5.5 minutes. You'll only hear the voice of Argus Hamilton, but we hope you enjoy it.
On Memorial Day weekend back in 1976, Mitzi Shore, our great owner of the Comedy Store, opened a brand new nightclub in Pacific Beach, right where Garnett meets the sand, at a steakhouse called T.D. Hayes. It was on the ground floor. And Mitzi scheduled on that very first weekend, a couple of newcomers like myself and Michael Keaton, but some experienced comics were on that show, including David Letterman, Gary Muldeer, and George Miller, Dave's best friend, and the headliner, Gallagher. And so she really loaded up the show with a tremendous lineup in order to really get the show jumping and get the town of San Diego talking about this brand new Comedy Store. And did it ever work? That first weekend at the Comedy Store Pacific Beach, David Letterman hosted the show and just set the pace for what would be a tremendous successful run for the Comedy Store that's 39 years and counting this next weekend. And what San Diego's Pacific Beach Comedy Store Club was sort of a stalking horse to see if a comedy club could work on the road. Nobody knew. And when the Pacific Beach Comedy Store took off and became a tremendous success, within no time, there was the Laugh Stop in Newport Beach and in Encino, and all of a sudden these comedy clubs started popping up all over the country. But it was because of the success of the Pacific Beach Comedy Store, a true stalking horse for the genre of comedy clubs that really helped give the comedy era the boost it needed to take off and take over the country. It's too bad because it was about a 175-seat room on the bottom floor. I think it's a T-shirt shop there now where Garnett meets the sand. And it was run and owned by the T.D. Hayes Steakhouse, which was there for a long, long time. And when Mitzi Shore wanted to raise the cover charge from $3 to $4 on holiday Sunday nights a year later, and T.D. Hayes refused, thinking, well, that might hurt our drink sales, because under the agreement, Mitzi got the covers, and T.D. Hayes, the restaurant, got the drinks, right? And Mitzi would pay the comics. And so Mitzi wanted more money on Sunday night on holiday Sundays, and when T.D. Hayes wouldn't budge, Mitzi walked up to La Jolla, and she had me drive her, as a matter of fact, up to the La Jolla, and we walked into this disco on Pearl Street, and Mitzi and I were talking to each other across the room during the middle of the afternoon, and we could hear each other so clearly and so loudly that she said, "This is the place. This has the acoustics," and it became the Comedy Store La Jolla. And in tribute to that disco that it used to be, the stained glass window ceiling is still there at 916 Pearl Street, where the Comedy Store La Jolla is today. And the best thing about the San Diego crowds, from an L.A. perspective, is that up here in Los Angeles, our rooms are tough to play. A lot of them are old rooms with padded walls, and the laughter doesn't really ricochet around. But in rooms like the Comedy Store Pacific Beach and the Comedy Store La Jolla, these black brick walls, all the focus on stage makes for tremendous comedy. And the San Diego comedy fans became so famous for being the best comedy fans in the country that in the late 70s, all the comics who recorded albums would go down to the Comedy Store La Jolla and record there because the acoustics and the enthusiasm and the general hipness of the crowds were so pronounced in San Diego. The people in San Diego are different from the people in Los Angeles, and the people of San Diego actually know what's going on in national news. Okay, people in Los Angeles are very hip to pop culture news, but people in San Diego know what's going on nationally, and that makes a big difference, especially if you're targeting an album or a performance to the rest of the country. Absolutely. He broke in both clubs. He broke in the Comedy Store Pacific Beach on Memorial Day of '76, and he also hosted the show August 8th, 1977, on the very first night of the Comedy Store La Jolla. And, you know, the comedy fans in San Diego really took to Dave because he was casual like San Diego, he was laid back like San Diego, he was sarcastic and ironic like San Diego. And he had a real, not misanthropic, but an antithetical look at the establishment, like all the baby boomers in San Diego felt at the time, and they could not get enough of Dave. Dave would go on stage at the Comedy Store Pacific Beach and then at La Jolla with a sheet of paper in his hand with 20 of his little bits. And he would plan to do these bits during his act, and they were all very funny, tightly written little comedy bits, very funny stuff. But he would start talking to the audience, and they would just eat him up, and he would be lucky if he got through 3 or 4 of those bits in the 25 to 30 minutes he was allotted. He had such a great time talking to the San Diego comedy fans, making fun of them, and laughing it up with them extemporaneously and off the cuff, which he so brilliantly did.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful audience. Good night.
So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it as interesting as I did. This was kind of an experiment, so if you like it, let us know, and maybe we'll do kind of some more of these things about the history of entertainment in San Diego. And if you didn't like it, just keep it to yourself.